Hi and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and it's something I've been wanting to do for a while but just haven't done it yet, and it makes me a little bit nervous, but it's something I love. So I'm going to start a new series, and it's going to be called Book of Mormon Tidbits, and every week there'll be something specific from the Book of Mormon or the scriptures that I'm talking about, and it might go along with Come Follow Me for the week. It might not, it might just be something that kind of stuck out to me and I wanted to share with you guys. So if you are new to my channel or haven't been familiar with it in the past, this channel I created as a homeschooling resource to kind of go over some different curriculum ideas or organizational ideas, or just to give you ways that you could better yourself as a person, or things that have helped me. And I think whether you're actually homeschooling your kids, whether they're in public school or right now they're, in between whatever's going on in the world today, that it's so important to make sure that teaching them about Christ is the focus of our home. And so it's homeschooling, regardless of whether your kids are in public or homeschool. And so I think that this is important and good for everyone and applicable to everyone. So I'm excited for you all to be here today. And if you want to be notified of future uploads about Book of Mormon studies and also everything else I share, just hit that subscribe button below, and let's talk about a Book of Mormon tidbit. So this week, I wanted to talk about records. So records actually does go along with Come Follow Me this week, and we're gonna talk about how in just a few minutes. But first I just want, what are records? What do we do with them? How do we get them? And all these different things. And so I looked up a definition, because the internet can be very handy for looking up definitions. And I just wanted to start out with a definition. And so if we have records as a noun, this is what it says. I'm gonna read it from all my little notes over here. So it says, a thing constituting a piece of evidence about the past, especially an account of an act or occurrence kept in writing or some other permanent form. The sum of the past achievements or actions of a person or organization, a person or thing's previous conduct or performance. And then if you want to see it as a verb, it's to set down in writing or some other permanent form for later reference. So you're writing down something about someone or something, mostly permanent, at least hopefully, if we should be trying to make sure our records are permanent. So using material or means to make sure that they're permanent. So I'm gonna just give you a few insights about records today, and using that a little bit from the scriptures and from personal experience. So this week in Come Follow Me, we're studying the tiny books that in the Book of Mormon that end the small plates. So that's Enosh, Jerem, Omni, and then small plates end, and then we have Words of Mormon, which is kind of an explanation of the small plates. So we have these books, and one of the main things that these books teach us is the importance of records. And I just love it. They're so small, but they pack a really good punch. So I wanted to start off by telling you why records are important to me, where my passion for records came from. And I'm not a good family history person. It's just, I don't know, I'm really busy. You can think of all the excuses. It's just never been something that was my strong point. And my mom, I've never lived close to my parents, and so they have all the records, and so it's been kind of hard to compile everything. I know, excuses. But I love journals, and journaling has always been very important to me for a very long time. So as a young child, I always loved to read. I especially loved historical fiction. And one of my favorite series that I read as kind of a tween age was The Work and the Glory. And as I read it, I just wanted to have records like they did. Just stories of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, just a journal like this, a journal that I could grab and just read about my ancestors. And I didn't really have that. I have stories here and there, but I don't have a journal I can just grab and read. And I don't have a lot of church history in my background as far as pioneer ancestry. My dad is a first generation member, and my mom's side of the family is members kind of off and on back, but there's just not those strong ties. So I just don't have really solid records, like journals that I could read. And so it just felt so very important to me to do that for my kids. And you hear the Prophets and Apostles Council about that. And so I made a goal over 15 years ago to write in my journal every day. And I rarely missed a day, maybe a handful of days, just because it became so important to me. And I'm just gonna hold, these are nowhere near all my journals. There are so many of them, it's ridiculous. Recently, I typed up a bunch of them just because some of them are falling apart, like this one. So good luck figuring out what's going on in there. But then I have some of these. I think this one's from like 6th grade. It's not one I wrote in every day. This was before I like set my goal, but I think it has some of the guys I had crushes on and stuff in it. So that's hilarious. But so these are all, this is from Ross years ago. They're all kind of random. Some of them are a little bit uniform in what they look like, and other ones are not. So these ones are all my mission journals right here. So these ones are the same, and I have a whole bunch of different kinds of journals that kind of just tell where I was in my life and just everything that was going on, and I cherish them so much. There's so many great stories in them, there's so many sad stories in them, and it just kind of helps me remember where I was, what I was doing, how I got over it or got through it, and then where I am now. And so I think record keeping is just so very important, and I just love it. So kind of fast forward into me getting married, and my husband, you know, he got a journal, and most of us have gotten journals probably for a birthday present at some point in our lives. And you get this journal and you write in it for like a week because you're so excited about it, and then you forget about it. And I know that's happened to so many of us. That happened to me a lot too before I like set a goal to actually write every day. And then he went on a mission, you know, and he wrote in his journal as a missionary, but then you come home and you're kind of out of the routine, so you just aren't writing as much. So all these things happened. And then, you know, after a few years of me being an avid journal writer, and side note, my journal entries are not amazing most of the time. Sometimes it's just like, this is what I did today, and it's just like a checklist kind of thing. I'm wanting to think it's like I'm writing a novel. Sometimes that's the case, but a lot of times it's not. So it wasn't anything amazing, but just writing down what was going on in our lives and documenting it was important to me. And so eventually he started writing in a journal every day, and he's rarely missed a day as well. And he's hilarious when he tells stories, and he remembers details so well. So his journals are a lot more detailed than mine, and it's gonna be so fun to have the combination of the two journals together for our kids and grandkids to be able to read them and just have this very dynamic situation of what was going on in our lives and what they were doing. Like I'm sure there's days where he's like, oh, the kids were so great, and I'm like going crazy and ready to, you know, ship them all away to grandma or something like that. So I just love it, and I love keeping these records. And I have a story, but I'm not gonna share it yet. I'm gonna share it at the end so that you like stick around to listen to the story. But so this is one of my mission journals, and this last year I was reading it and I discovered something in it, and my husband didn't know about it until last year. And we've been married just over 10 years, and he about died. So stay tuned for this story. But now we're going to get into the Book of Mormon and talk about records in the Book of Mormon, why it's so important. So first I want to start off by saying we're going to focus mostly on the Book of Omni. And Omni has 5 people that are recording records in it at over 200 years. And the Book of Omni is only 30 verses long. So it's very short. It has a ton of scribes, you know, writing for the Book of Mormon. And we don't have a ton of information. It's more just, I wrote a little bit and passed it down, and wrote a little bit and passed it down. And that's how it goes. But there's some really key stuff in the Book of Omni about records that I just absolutely love. So we're going to turn to this book. And so first of all, in this book, you know, that'd be like second of all, because I already said first of all, but that's all right. We can have several first of alls. So we're going to look at Omni chapter 1, because there is only one chapter. And let me find it real quick. No. I'll get there eventually. So in Omni, we're introduced to the Mulekites, but in the book of Omni, it talks about them as the people of Zarahemla. And so this is just such a cool story, guys. I just love it so much. Don't worry, we're almost there. It's so hard to find because it's so little, but here we go. So what we have here is Mosiah, number 1. So this is King Benjamin's father, and he lives in the land of Nephi, and he's warned from the Lord that he needs to leave. He is the king at this time. And so he leaves with whoever will come with him, and they make their way to the land of Zarahemla. And so when they get to the land of Zarahemla, they discover the Mulekites, the people of Zarahemla. And it tells a few things about them. Mosiah gives us a little bit of background about them. So in verse 15, I'm going to just read what it says. It says, "Behold, it came to pass that Mosiah discovered that the people of Zarahemla came out from Jerusalem at the time that Zedekiah, king of Judah, was carried away captive into Babylon." So these people, the Mulekites, came out of the land of land of Jerusalem, the same time, almost exactly, that Lehi and his family were leaving. So they're both in Jerusalem and they both leave. And they both, later on it talks about that the Lord carried these people, the Mulekites, across the ocean, just like Lehi and his family travel across the ocean, and they come here to the Americas. So this is awesome because these two groups of people started at the same place. They came from the same place, but where they ended up is so different. And there's one big reason why. I bet you can't guess because it's not like it's the topic of what we're talking about today. But here it is. We're going to keep reading in verse 17. It says, "And at the time that Mosiah discovered them, they had become exceedingly numerous. Nevertheless, they had had many wars and serious contentions and had fallen by the sword from time to time. And," we gotta flip the page, "and their language had become corrupted, and they had brought no records with them. And they denied the being of their creator and Mosiah, nor the people of Mosiah could understand them." So they come, but they don't bring records with them. They don't have anything to remember about where they're from, who Christ is, nothing. They have nothing. And because of that, they forget about Christ. They forget how to communicate. And so when the people of Mosiah meet him, they can't communicate. And Mosiah talks to them, eventually teaches them how to communicate. And then Zarahemla is able to tell him about them, about their people, about their heritage and things like that. So, and as that happens, I love this verse. It comes before all of these verses. It's in verse 14. I kind of skipped over it. So you're probably like, why did she skip that? It's the best one. We're going back. Okay, it's okay. So we're going to go back and read this verse because I just love it. And it just shows how important records are. So verse 14 says, they discovered this people who were called the people of Zarahemla. Now there was a great rejoicing among the people of Zarahemla. And also Zarahemla did rejoice exceedingly because the Lord had sent the people of Mosiah with the plates of brass, which contained the record of the Jews. They were so excited because the people of Mosiah had records. They couldn't really communicate at this point, and they didn't really remember a bunch of stuff about them, about their history or anything like that. But they just knew these records were important, and they were very excited about it. Well, how did these people have these records? Because Lehi, they left Jerusalem, and the Lord told him to send Nephi and his sons back. Not Nephi's sons, but his brothers, to go back to Jerusalem to get the plates of brass. And it was hard. It was a very big struggle for them to get these plates. Laban didn't just hand them over. It was a big deal. But it was so, so important. In these stories, we see why. What happened to one people that left Jerusalem and what happened to another, because one had records and one didn't. So I just wanted to read in 1 Nephi, I think it's chapter 5, because it's going to talk about Lehi when he gets these records. They come back from getting the records from Jerusalem, and he immediately searches them from the beginning. That's what we read in 1 Nephi 5:10. because he was so excited to read them. And he learns about his history. He learns about who his family was, who his ancestors, that he was a descendant from Joseph of Egypt. All these things he learned from these records that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And then in verse 21 of that same chapter, it says, "And we had obtained the records which the Lord had commanded us, and searched them and found that they were desirable, yea, even of great worth unto us, insomuch that we could preserve the commandments of the Lord unto our children." So they understood that because they had these records, their children would know about Christ. They would be able to pass these down and continue to know about where they came from and who Christ was, and it could help them as they went through, forward into the future. And I just absolutely love this. I just think it is so amazing and such a testimony to me of the importance of records, of keeping a record. And you don't have to do something crazy. If you can't write something every day, that's fine. Maybe you set a goal for once a week. If that's too much, maybe once every 2 weeks. I don't know. It's like reading your scriptures. You just set little goals and keep pushing yourself. So I know some people like to kind of do bullet journals. I'm not super familiar with them, or, chapbooks. Again, I don't know a whole lot about those things because I'm not in the know with that stuff. But this is an Erin Condren journal. Well, what is this? A calendar. It's a calendar. And so this would be good. This is a little bit more pricey, but it's beautiful. And so if you wanted something nice to record stuff maybe about your kids, and this one just has the dates and has some blanks here. So it would be really easy just to go down and maybe write something funny, or I don't know, something Christ did for you, anything, or about your kids, to have it divided in something like this. Or you can just go to Walmart and buy a cheap one. I guess it depends if you want to keep it long term or not. Maybe you want something nicer if you're going to keep it long term. Something else that I just started doing recently that I just felt was important for me was keeping a Christ journal. And I think I was listening to something with Come Follow Me, and I just thought I needed to recognize more what Christ was doing in my life. And so I just started writing it down. This is, again, Erin Condren. It was something I already had. I already had this journal and had been taking some church notes in it. So I just started, every day. Some days are shorter. They're not really color coded, but I just pick a different pen to write in them, and wrote some different things about Christ and how he was impacting my life and influencing me every day. And I feel like it just made me realize that he is in my life every single day. And that's what records do. They help us know that Christ hasn't left us, that he's always there. So just a few more thoughts. Let me look at my notes real quick and see where we are. But I wanted to share quickly just a few other scriptural examples. I'm not going to turn to them, but one really strong one that is the foundation of the restored church is Joseph Smith. And without a record, Joseph Smith wouldn't have been able to see God and Jesus Christ. It just most likely wouldn't have happened. And his family, they had the Bible. Here's my humongous Bible. So they had the Bible, and that's what led him to ask questions in the first place and then go into the sacred grove and pray. And if he didn't have those things, the Lord would have found another way. But it was because of records that he was able to get answers to his questions. So I think it's important to remember that because of someone writing something down, it was able to inspire a 14-year-old boy to seek God. And that's what records do for us. And then another one that I love from the Book of Mormon, I hope I'm never chastised for forgetting to write something down by Christ, but that's what happens when he comes to the Americas after he is resurrected. He's talking to Nephi, and he's like, wait a second, something's missing from these records. It doesn't talk about Samuel the Lamanite. And they're like, oh yeah, that's true. You're right. And he's like, why didn't you write it down? So, Nephi fixes that and goes and writes it down. But I just imagine, being chastened by the Lord for forgetting to write something down. And I hope I'm never in that situation. It sounds like it would be horrible. But I love that example too, that it is that important. It was something that Christ realized wasn't written down, and he points it out to them because people need to remember what Samuel the Lamanite said, especially because he's talking about Christ being born and Christ dying, and people need to know about that. And so I just love records, obviously. As you can see, I love them very much. So I just encourage you to try to keep records, especially right now in this time, because there's so many different, struggles going on in the world, and you're stuck in your house, so you have some time to write stuff down. And it's okay to write things that it's hard and I'm frustrated and I cried yesterday, or I just don't know how God could do this. Like, write those things down and then write how you overcame them, because that's where you will find strength in the future. That's where your kids will find strength in the future. Nephi and his family, again, they knew these records were so important, and that's why they needed to keep them. So I'm trying to decide where I want to go right now, because we're almost done, but I just wanted to share a few other thoughts. So I think I'm going to share the story from my journal, and then I'll wrap it up with one last scripture from the Book of Mormon. So my husband and I met on our mission, and we didn't know each other super well as missionaries, but I had started teaching someone, and they were going to get baptized, but my husband was the one that ended up baptizing them. So we kind of had these little bits of interactions here and there, but nothing super profound or whatever. And so last year I was reading my journal, because we got home from our mission together. We flew home together, which is a whole nother story, but we flew home at the same time from our mission. And then the next day he called me, and then the next day we went on a date. So we got home Wednesday, went on a date Friday. 3 weeks later, he was like hypothetically talking about getting married. And so 6 weeks after we got home, we were engaged. And so it was just kind of this like quick, crazy thing. But I had sent him a postcard the week before we left our mission, like giving him my information to call. So he always says it's my fault that he called in the first place, which I'm pretty sure he would have found a way to call me regardless of whether or not that happened. But I was reading again through this journal about 6 months. It was about 6 months before we went home, and I had some medical issues, and was down for this baptism of this man, which before I don't know if I would have been if I hadn't been there for the medical issues. And so I went to this baptism and was talking to him, and we did me and my companion. She was an amazing pianist. I love listening to her play. And so she played. I'm not musical, I don't sing, but I wrote a poem about Joseph Smith. And so I read it as she played a song. So he asked for that poem. And then in here, I said, here we go. I'm reading my journals to you. You should feel special. Not that it's anything super saucy, but so he asked for a copy of the poem, and he said I could fax it to him. Yes, we are old. And he verified that I had his home address, because I had asked for it a while before, but he told me he didn't have mine. So he wanted to come stalk me. Proof right here that he wanted to come stalk me. And so I quickly wrote it down for him, and that was that. Like, I didn't think I was gonna see him, because at that point we were scheduled to come home. He was gonna come home 6 weeks before me. And so I figured, I don't know if I'll see him or not. But then because of health issues, I ended up coming home 6 weeks earlier. And so that's why we came home together. But right after that, in my journal, it says, if you couldn't already tell, I have a little bit of a crush on Elder Paulson. And then it says, well, I need to go. So last year he heard that and he's like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, you had a crush on me that early on? And it was the farthest thing from his mind. He did not think of me that way or have a crush on me or anything like that. So just funny things like that you get to come across in your journals. And it's just so fun. We love reading through them and sharing stories and just enjoying those moments together where I can feel a little bit embarrassed because I had a crush on him and he didn't know. But it's documented and it's there. And the feelings of that moment are there. And so now he can read it forever and make fun of me forever. But so just to end with a final few thoughts, I just love in the beginning of Mosiah, King Benjamin's talking to his people, and he starts telling them about these records. And I'm just going to kind of skip through these verses because they're really long. but it's verses 3 through 5. And he mentions the records, which were engraven on the plates of brass. He says, "My sons, I would that you should remember that were it not for these plates which contain these records and these commandments, we must have suffered in ignorance, even at this present time, not knowing the mysteries of God." So if we didn't have these records, right now we wouldn't be knowing God. And these people he's talking to are kind of a mixture of the Mulekites and Lehi, the Nephites, these people coming both from Jerusalem that went this way, and now they're coming back together. And because of records brought them back together. So it said, "For were it not possible that our father Lehi could have remembered all these things, to have taught them to his children, except it were for the help of these plates, for he having been taught in the language of the Egyptians, therefore he could read these engravings and teach them to his children, that thereby they could teach them to their children, and so fulfilling the commandments of God, even down to this present time." And continues to talk to him about if they didn't have these records, they wouldn't know about God, and people would have been lost. And that's what happened until records came back to the Mulekites. And so I love these stories. I just know that keeping records is so important, and that God has given us these records so that we can remember him and remember who we are and gain strength when we're struggling, when we're going through hard times like we are now. We can look back on our journals, on the Book of Mormon, on the Bible, and learn more about our Savior and just feel that spirit and feel that peace. And so I just love that we can learn so much from the Book of Omni. It's such a small book, but it teaches us mountains and mountains of information. And so please comment below your favorite way to keep a journal. Whether you write every day or once a week or a bullet journal, I would love to hear it. And then over here, maybe, I can't ever remember, on one of these sides of me, there will be another video that talks about why I think it's so important to read. And I just love it. I love reading, and I think it helps us so very much. So check that video out and have an amazing week.